Good evening, everyone. I understand that there are still a few people lined up on the second floor, so I said they could miss me. That by the time they make it in, they'll be able to hear the meat of the program, which is our incredible panel. But I'm Judy Gradwell. I'm president and CEO here at the San Diego Natural History Museum, and we are delighted to welcome you to the NAT for our 9th annual State of Biodiversity Symposium, From Exploration to Conservation. And let's give it up for this slideshow, which I understand was made by Rachel Larson and Anna Arft. How many people here were involved on one of the expeditions? Look at that. Thank you for your contributions. This was our dream 9 years ago when we decided to have a State of Biodiversity Symposium, was that we would gather together people from many different parts, many different points of view to discuss important points related to biodiversity in our region. And I just thought, I was so impressed when I saw the RSVP list at the diversity on there. I know we have students. Can we see the hand? Let's see the students. Check this out. This is our future, everyone. And I know we have quite a few people who came up from Mexico. Let's see them. Look at that. And we have, I know we have some tribal representatives here, which we are very honored to have. And let's have it. Universities on both sides of the border. Governments. So yeah, there we go. So this is great. This is exactly the type of dialogue we want to be having with a group like this, and I can't think of a more important topic right now. I wanted to start by paying our respects to the indigenous peoples who are traditional stewards of the land, and the Kumeyaay people have lived in this region since time immemorial, and through colonization, they were removed, they've been minimized, but they have persisted and they remain a part of this land and society today. And the museum, and I'm sure all of you, honors them for their legacy of understanding and protecting nature and creating genuine and, and creating genuine and mutually beneficial partnerships is an ongoing process, and we're committed to nurturing that with our Kumeyaay collaborators and others. Beginning with the NAT's first binational expedition over a century ago, the museum has been committed to regional exploration rooted in collaborative partnerships that create knowledge and understanding of the natural world. And today that legacy continues through really strong partnerships, and we've got a lot of partners here tonight as well. We are thrilled to find new ways to collaborate using wonder and science and exploration to exchange ideas, create conservation solutions through multinational and interdisciplinary research. This April and May, we'll be mobilizing our communities to participate in community science through the City Nature Challenge and the BioBlitz. And then on May 14th, we're proudly hosting the Nature Record here at the NAT to present their findings on the first comprehensive assessment of nature in the United States. It's taking place in 6 places around the country, and this is one of them. So if you're in the area and can come, this is a free event, and it's a wonderful opportunity to share your thoughts on nature in the region. I know that many of you have been working on habitat assessment and conservation for decades, and want to take a moment to thank and honor you for your service to nature in the Californias and beyond. So let's thank them. I can't think of a more critical time to focus on local efforts, engage communities, and work together on preserving nature in this amazing place we call home. I know we have colleagues from across the border, other parts of California, and I want to thank you all for being here in San Diego. For the past 9 years, we've hosted an annual State of Biodiversity Symposium, bringing together scientists, conservationists, nature lovers to discuss biodiversity in our region and how we can continue to conserve it. Tonight we have 3 talented speakers who will present and discuss expeditions, past, present, and future, and share ways to ensure that exploring the wonder of nature is accessible to everyone. Together we can foster collaboration across borders and build meaningful connections that strengthen conservation efforts across regions. Our goal is to help shape a future where plants, wildlife, and people thrive together, and where everyone feels connected to our extraordinary region. And that's why programs like tonight matter so much. Before we begin the program, I happen to have the commercial announcement. I have a few reminders. Emergency exits are located back behind you and behind me. And while we do ask that you silence your cell phone, we encourage you to continue tonight's conversation on social media using #NatTalk. We're deeply grateful to our presenting sponsor, the Downing Family Foundation, and our media partner, KPBS, for their continued and generous support of the Nat Talk season. And we also extend our thanks to San Diego Foundation for their sponsorship of tonight's event. So with that, let's all take a moment to congratulate Michelle Thompson, the architect of this. We are all the beneficiaries of the care and effort that she's been putting in, the heavy load she's been carrying for the past few months to put this together. And so we thank her mightily, and join me in welcoming our Director of Conservation Biology, Michelle Thompson, who's going to introduce tonight's speakers.
Thank you, Judy, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. So I also want to give a huge thanks to everyone. It takes an army really to put this together. We have all our partner organizations, our speakers, AV up there that have get the slides running, Craft Taco to feed you all, and of course all of you. So thank you so much for all that hard effort to everyone. So tonight, we welcome our speakers that will share stories of expeditions and exploration and how that work ultimately leads to conservation. Even though people have been exploring the natural world for many years, there is still so much left to discover. And that spirit of exploration really belongs to everyone. And so we're gonna go ahead and jump to our first speaker, Sula Vanderplank. Sula is the director and lead scientist at Suva Research. She has a lot of experience in the US-Mexico borderlands and the Baja California Peninsula, and she's been a longtime friend, colleague, and a collaborator with the NAT. We've been very fortunate to work with her on expeditions and many other projects. So please welcome Sula.
Good evening, everybody. What an honor to be here with you all tonight and to talk about one of my favorite things, which is expeditions. Go ahead. I want to start with a definition of expeditions. And so if we just take a sort of run-of-the-mill definition of expeditions, expeditions are journeys or voyages that are organized by a certain group for a certain purpose. And of course, tonight we're talking about expeditions for biodiversity and for research in Baja California. And this always brings back to me memories of eating off the campfire, cooking on the campfire, wonderful times in faraway places. But what I really want to talk to you about tonight is how the group that undertakes these expeditions has evolved and how the purpose of the expeditions has evolved over time. So I thought the best place to start would be the beginning. This is my first major expedition in Baja California on muleback. I was a graduate student. I think this was about 2010 or 11, a while back now. And we rode mules through the southern Sierra San Pedro Martir. And it was just an amazing opportunity, and I liked it so much. We jumped back on a mule and did it again right away afterwards. And of course, you tie your plant press to the back of your mule, and you find a cowboy who can collect plants for you without getting off the mule. And this way you can just move across the landscape and never get off the horse, and you pop the plants in the press and you just keep going. And the main cowboy that led us through the mountains on these amazing expeditions was Don Chewy to me, or Chewy Lawyer, who you see pictured here. And I loved the first expedition so much. I rode back by myself with all the animals. And then the next year we rushed out and we did the same expedition again. And it was just fantastic. And at the end of the second year, he said to me, Sula, why don't you do something useful? I just like, what do you mean? Do you not understand what I'm doing? You know, what I'm doing is so amazing. And let me tell you about my specimens and my research and how I'm changing the world. And he said, no, I mean, why don't you do something useful, for us? And I had that moment of like, oh, it never actually occurred to me to do something for you, and I remember him saying, like, you could do something for us about our useful plants, or a guidebook for us to know about our plants. And it was one of those epiphany moments where you realize, maybe I'm missing something. And so I think for me on that first expedition, and I think for many of us, if we're honest, with our early expeditions and a lot of traditional expeditions, the purpose of the expeditions, albeit extremely well-intentioned, was about us. It was for us to learn and for us to grow and to gain knowledge and to gain specimens and to do amazing things. And maybe we'd take our colleagues and our most esteemed friends and we'd get to know them better and we'd see the world through their eyes. And this was our way of trying to make a difference and change the world. And we came back at the end and we had recommendations for conservation and we were going to inform people about what they could do. And that was enough, we thought. And I feel like over the years, we've learned that really we ought to be perhaps doing some different things, like listening, teaching, sharing, involving our communities, trying to make sure that the people on the expedition look like the people in the community where we're working, supporting the people that are already stewarding the special remote places that we go to, and really driving community-based conservation and being a force for conservation instead of information for conservation. And so this has been my epiphany, and what I really wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight is how these things have changed, are continuing to change, are continuing to improve, I think, and what that evolution's been like. So I know that Nat's been doing expeditions in the region for a long, long time, and I love this picture of one of these early collaborative expeditions between the Nat and the California Academy of Sciences. And this was a trip to the Gulf of California. I'm afraid I don't know exactly which year. But you could see this was the group of scientists, and there's some really big names here. You guys know Michael Soule. He's like the father of conservation biology. Ira Wiggins wrote The Flora of Baja California. Reed Moran was the former curator of botany here at the Nat. Charles Harbison was one of the leading entomologists. These are our heroes, to a large extent for the scientific community. And then we take our modern expeditions, and you see some very obvious differences, like we wear a lot more clothes. but really, you see it. You see the difference. I don't have to describe what you're seeing. And this is what we're working towards, is expeditions where we look like the communities we're serving more, and where we're coming together, where there's more young people, where there's more diversity of every kind. So whereas expeditions are always field work, we're always collecting specimens if we can, or data through observations. We're always publishing to the scientific community. And over time, we're more and more focused on conservation action. I think there's a few guiding principles that, I'm not going to say we've got this yet, but things we're trying to do. And that is moving from just being multidisciplinary expeditions to being transdisciplinary. So instead of just all going together, trying to have a synthetic product and a synthetic impact. Also trying to go, not just working across the borders, but trying to make those borders disappear in the work that we're doing, and improving the multicultural nature of the expeditions and how equitable they are. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to talk you through some of the expeditions I've been involved with and how they've evolved, and some of the different things we've been doing to make that more of a reality. So the first expedition I was ever invited to co-organize now I'm talking about these large multidisciplinary expeditions, so lots of different disciplines, lots of different scientists. And Ezequiel Escurra was asked to organize an expedition to Cabo Pulmo, where the marine park is, to address some urgent conservation challenges. And he invited Ben Wilder and myself to help organize this expedition. And Ben had just started to organize this amazing network called the Next Generation of Sonoran Desert Researchers. And as part of this group, we realized we suddenly had access to a huge number of researchers. And this will sound silly, but it was kind of an epiphany moment for us to realize that we didn't actually know all the researchers in the region. You know how you think it's a small world and you know everyone in botany, if you're me, or in your small group. And we put out a call for proposals for anybody that wanted to come on the expedition. And this was the first time we did this, and we said, we're having an expedition. If you'd like to come, you can apply. And we saved, I think, 4 spots for unknown people, which seemed really risque at the time. But that became the model and the template, and we've done this so many times since, and it's proved so rewarding and such a wonderful way to expand our own networks. And this was these are just a few pictures of some of that group from that first expedition. We were 20 biologists, which we thought was so many back then, and from 11 institutions, and they were binational expeditions. And you're actually getting a sneak preview of the next speaker, Adrienne, there at the bottom. And there's a lot of the OG rock star scientists and conservationists on this first expedition. And one of the things we did was write a report about all the data that we found, and then we compared it to the environmental impact statement, which in Spanish is called a MIA, or a Manifiesto de Impacto Ambiental, and we compared how many species we found to how many species they had claimed were there in the environmental impact statement for these mega developments that were happening on the coast adjacent to this reef. And I just really want to highlight here, this was so impactful. So the environmental impact statement, just take the example of plants. Actually, let me see if I can I get this working? Okay, so they had 120 plants. When we actually corrected all the errors in their plant list and we took out all the synonyms where they had named the same plant 3 or 4 times different ways, they only actually had 52 plants. We found 392. And so the number that we're missing was 340. And so you can see this repeated over and over again for the different groups, and you'll see the patterns. But the absences, the emissions in that environmental impact statement were huge. The number of locally endemic species that were not mentioned was 83, and the number of species protected under Mexican law on the Endemic Species Act was 27. And I think for a lot of us, this was the first time we were on an expedition that had a complete conservation focus and a conservation impact, and we were able to take these data to the public hearing against these developments in the region. And we're still taking these data. Just last year, we actually had to take our data again to fight these new developments threatening that same marine park and that same reef. These projects, La Abundancia and Baja Bay Club, are completely unsustainable and really destroying not just these precious dune systems and the habitat there, but also we know that the downstream impacts will kill that reef and the marine park. Then I got a call. I got a call from the Mexican National Park Service, CNAMP, and they said, can you come and do the same thing here for us? And so we went here to Sierra La Laguna, this time to fight an open pit gold mine inside the Biosphere Reserve. And they said, really, we just don't actually have any data to fight this. This time, we took 29 scientists, but this time we went with 17 community members and the national park. And this time, the 19 institutions were about 50-50 US and Mexico. And we found some new species to science. But I think the bigger part of the story here was really being able to document these plants and animals and being able to show once again, this is the number of species that were in the environmental impact statement. There's the overlap between the two, and there's all the new records that we added. And so this is how we started using the expeditions to respond to conservation need and to address urgent conservation challenges. Then we said, well, what are we going to do for our next expeditions? if nobody calls with an urgent conservation need, what are we going to do? And that's when we realized we could support conservation initiatives and especially new protected areas. And so as the new biosphere reserve for islands of the Pacific, or Islas del Pacifico, was formed, we did an expedition to try and teach all the people living inside the biosphere reserve which plants and animals were unique and endemic to the islands. After that, we went to Revillagigedos. You saw some of these pictures at the beginning. And that first expedition in 2017 was right before the World Heritage Site was declared the largest national park in Mexico. And so we were able to inform that management plan. We were able to inform the declaration of the park and have a lot of conservation impact. And I'm just going to give you a couple of really quick pictures of that expedition and mention that the permits were a nightmare, and we're so grateful to Ezequiel Escura, who managed to get permits from 4 government agencies in Mexico. We got to hike to these still live volcanoes and through the fumaroles and through these ash fields of volcanoes that had erupted fairly recently, and we were really trying to document what had recolonized since these recent eruptions just 50 years ago. The next expedition was actually just north of Loreto, where I live. And this was to document all the biodiversity of a new area that was being destined for conservation. The key thing about this expedition was that this time we went marine terrestrial. And instead of just being all the terrestrial biologists, we went with our marine friends, and we had a team of 8 divers that went out every day documenting all the amazing marine diversity so we could actually have an integrated marine terrestrial view of these special places. And this time, again, now 28 people from the community, but far more institutions from Mexico than the US. And so I think we're just continuing to improve, continuing to be more inclusive. And our most recent big expedition that I've helped to organize was down to Rancho Encinalito. It's in 2023, right? We're down again here in Sierra La Laguna. And we got invited to a private ranch that's been 30 years fenced with no cattle, and they said, can you please help us document whether this has been good for conservation, what we've done, and make an argument for why it should still be protected. And of course, this is the group you've already seen that went down there, and we stayed on neighboring ranches and we worked with the community. And you'll see it's a young group because partly we had to actually hike into the ranch. It's a vehicle-free ranch where you had to hike down quite a long hill to get in and get back out. We camped on neighboring ranches. And the amazing thing that happened at the end of this expedition was that all the neighboring ranches said, we'd like to do conservation too, could you help us? And this amazing new initiative was born that's called UCAS, Unión de Conservación Agua de la Sierra. They now have 12 participating ranches. They're all just outside the Biosphere Reserve, so they don't get the benefits of being in the conservation area. They're working to form their own conservation area. They just got funding to support rare trees and other initiatives, and they're doing really amazing things. And then I want to just mention a couple of other things we've been doing jointly with the NAT in recent years, where we've kind of deconstructed expeditions a little bit. And one of the other solutions to changing the purpose of these expeditions is to slow down. And to do that expedition, instead of it being a one-time thing where we go for 1 week and we're done, to do that expedition slowly over a few years. And so these are expeditions in La Cuenca de los Planes, which are really focused on water and biodiversity. And from 2023 to 2026, there's actually been 26 small expeditions as part of this initiative. It's a joint initiative through Pro Natura Noroeste and the NAT. There's been 46 different educational outreach activities with local schools, all just inside that one watershed. So Cuenca's watershed, the Los Planes watershed. We've reached over 1,200 people in that area. They're almost all children and their families. We're developing curricula, we're developing specific games based on their local biodiversity, and also participating in events of massive reach. So things mostly in La Paz or other parts of the state of Baja California Sur that have thousands of people of attendance. And so each of these events had at least 1,000 people in attendance. So this way, this expedition has now reached thousands and thousands of people. It's also involved some amazing art science presentations, and I really want to give some props to Diana Gutierrez, who was out here at the table for Investigación en la Cuenca de los Planes. She made these beautiful silk screens of this rare tree, the ocote. It's the only sunflower tree on the peninsula, and she played sounds from the forest, and we did art science. We did a presentation about the decline of this tree in the area and what that looks like. And then one other thing I just want to mention, the museum has just returned to Sierra Cacachillas after a long absence. I think they were there 12 years ago. The first expedition was 2013. And this time, they engaged a huge number of ranchers, and I was just overwhelmed to see this amazing knowledge exchange with the local community and the ranchers. And I felt like we were finally asking, do you think this is useful? Do these guys think this is useful? And so just working hand in hand with the communities and fostering this kind of engagement and knowledge exchange and feedback has been really special. And I just want to give a couple of examples now from my own discipline, which is botany, and some of the really pointed things we've been trying to do to improve our equity and inclusion for the botany team. This was the botany team in 2013, the first time I went on one of the NATS expeditions to Sierra Cacachillas, and that's me in the middle. You probably can't tell anymore. I was so young. But this is what that team looked like. And so 10 years later, for the first time, we organized the all-women's botany expedition. And we did an all-women's expedition. And so this first one was in Loreto, and we did outreach to all the high school girls in the town. And we held a special forum on the value of protected areas. And really, we just took several days to help women build capacity to be able to do botany in the region. We liked it so much, we did it again in 2024. And this time we let some of our allies come too. But they could only come as guides, as logistical support, or to help lift up the women who are leading and running the expedition. In 2025, we did it again, but this time we went to UCAS, and we went to that community and we said, could you show us where your rare trees live, and we'll show you how we collect data on them. And we did this beautiful mapping together with the community of 8 rare trees in the region. And I feel like finally the community involved in the expedition looks like the community we're working in. And just for my last slide, I'd like to invite you all to take part in this ongoing expedition right now in the Borderlands that's running the whole month of April and May, where you can all be part of making sure that our expeditions look like the communities that they work in, and you can please contribute to the Border Bio Blitz. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sula. Our next speaker is Adrian Munguia Vega, and he is a researcher at University of Arizona. He is the founder and director of the Applied Genomics Lab. And Adrian has extensive experience in marine expeditions and is a population geneticist who uses genetic and genomic tools to understand and conserve biodiversity. So everyone welcome Adrian.
Thank you, Michelle. Hola a todos. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So, I'm going to talk about this region that we scientists refer to as the Southern California Bight, which is a region in between here, let me see, okay. So Point Conception, where the north part of the Channel Islands, to the middle of the peninsula, the Vizcaíno region. And this is actually the area of the influence of the California current. You know, the California current that comes from the north, very cold. That's why we have to use these very thick wetsuits when we do scuba diving. And we have been focused on this area for the last 5 years. And I'm gonna try to tell you why I fell in love with this part of the world. I hope you brought your swimsuit, because we are gonna go diving. This area is known because of the kelp forest. The kelp forest is like what we know as a foundational species. It creates the habitat that all the species need to live, to feed, they reproduce, they live in all these beautiful areas, and the number of species that you can find here is amazing. So we have been focused on understanding the kelp forest distribution and documenting the marine biodiversity, scuba diving mainly, in this area, both in Mexico and in the US. And this area there is something really interesting that is happening, and you might be even more familiar than I am, in terms of the effects of the climate, what is happening in this part of the world. So here you can see in this graph some of the kelp cover, how it was before the marine heat wave of 2015, 2014, and how it got reduced to, we lost almost 60% of the kelp in Mexico, and something similar happened here in Southern California too. So we are seeing that this area is seeing some very strong changes because of human impacts, and we are seeing that many of these human impacts are accumulating. Some of them are related to the climate, some of them are related to pollution or to overfishing, and in areas where we see that all these different impacts converge, then we see that we are losing the foundational species like the kelp, and we see a succession of the ecosystems to a shift to an explosion of sea urchins, as opposed to having a healthy kelp forest. So what happens in this area is not just in the kelp forest. We have some other very important habitats, like these seagrasses, that they play more or less the same function in terms of being habitat for many small and large species, like these giant sea bass or sea lions. And there is some really spectacular underwater landscapes, like you can see here from the Cortes Banks, or in this example from, this is Guadalupe Island, where not only the kelp, the giant kelp that we all know, but also many other types of algae, they provide the same ecological function of being a habitat for all the different species and sustaining this biodiversity. So what we have been trying to do is mapping and seeing which are these underwater habitats, where they are located, how many species they hold. But as you can imagine, looking at the species underwater is not very easy. So I'm going to tell you exactly how we use different technologies to try to understand the extent of this marine biodiversity. So in this last decade, I can say, there has been, we have created a network of many different institutions that are interested in understanding the biodiversity of this region that is very unique because it's shared between Mexico and the US. And it's shared for good and for the bad. So, because we are facing the same challenges that I just was mentioning, but also we are sharing many of the same species. You can see here the, many different institutions from the NGOs, both from Mexico and the US. And the interest of the NGOs, for instance, is to provide a baseline to help set protections, to establish marine reserves, or to limit the use of fishing gears, like recently in California, where there was a recently approved ban for gill nets that are going to be phased out in the Channel Islands over the next 10 years. So the interest of some of these organizations are very different, and each one is focused on different regions of the Southern California Bight. But all of them are connected in a sense that we all care about the biodiversity and what's happening, and we all recognize that the challenges that we are facing, or neighbors are facing them too in the north and in the south and in Mexico and the US. And if we want to conserve this region and the ecosystem services that they provide to us, then we need to work together because there is no way that we're going to save the kelp forest just in the US or just in Mexico, or we're going to rebuild the fisheries in the region if we are not working together. So you can see here some of the institutions, academic institutions also in Mexico and in the US. We partnered with many of the NGOs and also the FEDECOP, which is the Organization of Fishing Cooperatives in Baja California, because they are worried about the changes that they are seeing, the species decline for the abalone, the die-offs of lobsters and other invertebrates, the hypoxia and the warming that they are observing, and they are interested in understanding what's happening in the region. The academics, we are interested in trying to understand why some places are resistant to these marine heat waves and why some places are very vulnerable, and what makes a place more resistant or more resilient. Either the biodiversity that is present or the oceanographic conditions or whatever it is. So some years ago, we started thinking and using models. We scientists love using models because they are cheap. We don't need to spend a lot of money. So we use them a lot. In this example, we use it to predict the movement of larvae of different commercial species. So if you can imagine, this is a computer simulation that about the ocean currents. And if we have like a sea cucumber, for instance, that spawns in the winter and has a larvae that lasts in the water for 56 days on average, then you can see these networks of connectivity. The blue lines show places where if the sea cucumbers spawn in the US, how their larvae are going to reach like 200 or 300 kilometers south to El Rosario in Mexico. These are the marine reserves from in Channel Islands providing fishery subsidies to some fisheries in Mexico, for instance. And the other way around, depending on if a species spawns in a different season, and the currents go to the north, then you see some sheepheads spawning near Ensenada going to the Channel Islands, for instance. So we use a lot of models, and now that we are seeing so many changes in the biodiversity, we are seeing how the marine biodiversity is being shifted both latitudinally and bathymetrically. So species are moving to the north, the temperate ones are contracting. We are seeing some species going to more depths than they used to. And there is a lot of models, species distribution model that predict how things are going to change or how things are changing. But something that's really important that, that links to what Sula was saying is we need the expeditions to try to validate some of these models. Because maybe you don't think about it, but there is not a lot of people looking what's happening actually with the animals and plants underwater in different parts of this region. And we need people doing that to understand if all the models that we scientists use, if they are telling the truth or if we are completely biased and we don't know, we don't have idea what's going on. So we need to get underwater and we need to see the changes and we see how much species are present and where they are. So to study this marine biodiversity, we use different tools. This is one of my favorite toys, which is a Niskin bottle. This is a bottle that we deploy with a line from the surface, and we send a messenger, which is a weight that goes through the line, and then when the weight reaches the bottle, whatever depth it is, then it captures a sample of water. So it closes the bottle right there. We got the sample, and from that sample, we are able to use all the science to recover the number and name of different species that are present in that sample. I'm not going to go to all the details, but this is the magic of the science behind what we do. So basically, here we filter the water to collect individual DNA molecules floating from all the different animal and plant species that are present. We do a DNA extraction in the lab. We amplify make multiple copies of a particular segment of a gene of our choice, depending on which taxonomic group we want to survey, like fish or invertebrates or algae or microscopic animals. And then we use massive parallel sequencing for sequencing every molecule in that sample. We do a lot of bioinformatic analysis. And then we compare those sequences with all the sequences that are present in the world in databases like GenBank. And we try to identify taxonomically that sequence. So this is a way to explore biodiversity in a massive way. And that's the type of technologies that came about in the last 10 years that have allowed us to answer very interesting questions that we were not able to do before at the scale and the speed that we need in these days. So these are some of the results of combining the data from all these different expeditions that I just mentioned. And this is the first time, this was the perfect excuse for me to put together all this data. So this is the first time that you are seeing something like this. So we have evidence from all this of about 30,000 marine species in the region. This is excluding bacteria and viruses. So this is about an order of magnitude larger than what you will find on the textbooks, both in Mexico and in the US. And probably is still an underestimate of what's present in this area. And I can tell you, based on the studies that we have done similar things in the Gulf of California, which is a known biodiversity hotspot, the levels of biodiversity are similar and in the same scale. So this is a region that has much more species than what we believed before. And you can see here, based on this scale, there is some sites marked here in yellow that have up to 5,000 different things on a single site, on a single sample. And there's some interesting patterns. There's some islands, Coronado Islands, San Clemente, Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz in the Channel Islands that are hotspots. South of Ensenada, El Rosario appear with very, very high biodiversity. And here, based on this empirical data, now we can answer some of these questions about, okay, how many species are shared between the US and Mexico? And now we have the data to answer that question, and that's this number. So about half of these 30,000 species are shared across the border. And we have about 8,000 that are unique to the US and 7,000 that are unique to Mexico. And if you are wondering what all these species are, you can see all these different names here, which are the phyla or the very large branches in the tree of life that represent the huge diversity of things that we have. You can see here big circles for arthropods, mainly crustaceans, chlorophyta, which is green algae, bacillariophyta, which are diatoms, and a bunch of different invertebrates and that have names that I can barely pronounce. But you can see the extent and the depth of biodiversity in this area. So one of the interesting things that we have learned while doing this is if you go to the textbooks, they tell you that most of the marine biodiversity is near the surface. But then when we go and look at some of these deep samples, that now we have the access, thanks to the technology, to measure the biodiversity in these areas, we see that samples, here you can see this red line, to the left is the things that we can scuba dive, and to the right, things that we cannot scuba dive. But that now we have the data to see how much biodiversity is present. And we are seeing that there is some deep sites that have as much biodiversity or even more than the shallow sites. So there is an observation bias from our side that we thought there was not a lot of diversity there, but it was because we haven't looked in those places, right? So I'm just gonna finish with some of these videos of what it looks like, some of this biodiversity when we go and sample. So you can see here the pelagic environment, and we think the pelagic environment has been empty like a desert. And here you can see that that's not the case. There is a lot of animals and planktonic animals that live and die and reproduce in these places. And in this huge volume is filled with swarms of squids or any other type of marine creature. And if you drop a deep sea camera in a random place of this region, you likely will find something like this, which is a soft bottom. And look at the amount of fish and the amount of invertebrates that you can find in some of these places. Some of them are 500 meters, 300 meters deep. And they are feeding from all the marine snow that is falling from the surface. You can see here some sea urchins and some other weird invertebrates that I can barely identify myself. And when you look at some of these places, sometimes you are lucky enough to hit some hard substrate, like rocks, like in this case. And you see that they are filled with fish, with many invertebrates attached to the rocks. There is one recent example where there's a new project where people are trying to look at the ocean floor, and we estimate that we have seen less than 1% of the ocean floor globally. And this is the type of things that we are trying to change in the region through some of these expeditions. And finally, some of this application of this information is trying to create these, for each one of these 30,000 things that we now, some of them we can identify, some of them just at the phylum level or the class or the family level. We don't have the specific tags, but we do know the sequence. And we attach a unique ID of this one to these ones. So for each one of these 30,000 things, we can create these 3D maps, which consist on the latitudinal distribution and the bathymetric distribution as of today. And this can be as a baseline to measure the changes that we observe into the future. So this is one of the applications that we are trying to do across the region to understand how things are shifting due to climate change. And I will stop there. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Our next speaker is Francisco Basso Merel, and he's a bugologist. So Francisco is a wildlife and conservation biologist that focuses on science communication, education, and accessibility. And while we welcome him up here, we all should congratulate him as well, because it's his 1-year anniversary from starting the Bugologist Project. So he's going to tell us more about it.
Excellent. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. So, yeah, it's been 1 year since I started this project, and I want to tell you a little bit more about what it is about. There we go. So, this is going to be a talk about bugs. I really like bugs, as you can tell, and about conserving or preserving the species across the border. So, I am a wildlife conservation biologist. I did my undergrad in UC Davis, where I focus mostly on vertebrates, as most of my classmates did. So if you have ever looked at conservation projects, you usually think of animals like pandas or rhinos or birds, animals that are pretty big, pretty easy to see, and pretty easy to connect with. But I was always more attracted to the ones that were hard to connect with, or like the ugly ones, like the mountain yellow frog program, or like this little lizard. But I also was part of some mammal projects. They're also really cool. But then I started to realize that while most of these conservation projects did focus mostly on these big animals, most of the diversity in Earth is not found in these animals. Most of the diversity in Earth is found in actually the other groups, like insects or crustaceans or arachnids. And very few of them, you can see right here, are vertebrates. But most of the conservation projects are found there. This is from a study done in 2016, talking about how many of the projects that we see in the world are focused mostly on mammals or on birds. A few of the other groups are like reptiles and fish, and almost there at the bottom you can see like mushrooms, mollusks, and insects. But then why is that when most of the animals are not them? And so I like them just because I think they're cool. But how can I make people actually like these animals and connect with them enough to want to preserve them instead of just squashing a spider or just avoiding them entirely or learning about them? And so I started to get more into entomology. That was just a hobby. It wasn't in my major. I started to be an intern at the Bochart Museum of Entomology, where I did mostly just sampling of bees, but also a little bit of outreach. And that's where I fell in love with doing education. And so then I started to do scientific communication. When I started to work in an aquarium here in San Diego called the Living Coast, I work a lot with animals that are native to the region, and I kind of figured out that what I wanted to do moving forward to get people to care about these animals was trying to make them connect with them, but also to make it more accessible. And so that's where I created the projects that I'm going to talk about. So I started to work with my art. I really like doing art. All the art that you see here, I made it. And so I wanted to make art. Oh, thank you. Wanted to make art a different way for people to connect with these animals. Whenever we see, for example, a large mammal like a cat or a panda, they make some expressions with their face that you can kind of relate to, you know. Or like if you ever see a toy in a like a zoo shop or a zoo gift shop, it's gonna mostly be big animals like elephants or pandas. And it's easy for us to connect with them. Again, we're also mammals. We cannot connect if they make faces and stuff. But many of these animals, they not only physically cannot make expressions, but they're also really small, really hard to connect with. And so my goal is to try to put them in front of you so you can see them a little bit closer. So one of those ways, I think, is art. And like many of my projects, I try to make everything bilingual. So in this case, I am showing some of the different coloring pages that I did for this project, talking about the species of bees that are here. Because, I mean, if kids are already gonna draw something in the coloring page that you give them, why not give a little bit of education packed in there? And so this was about the native bees of North America. And there's so many types of bees. Here in San Diego, we have some of the most diverse groups of bees in the U.S. And also I did a lot of work in Tijuana, and so this is talking about the biodiversity that we have in this region, which is really cool, but we almost never see it if you live in urbanization or if you have like a more constrained schedule where you just go to work or go from home to work. This is kind of like a different way to get people to look at these animals. But maybe you don't like your bugs so realistic. So this is a project mostly for little kids, but also for people who, again, like their bugs a little bit more cute. This is my attempt to make these animals, these arthropods, more, I anthropomorphize them, but also to make them more appealing, you could say. So we have over there water strider. This over here is a gapostemon bee, is a metallic sweat bee. They're really cool. And then this one over here is a solifugid, so it's a type of arachnid. And so I think by just giving them a different approach, it doesn't have to be like super cool art or like you don't have to make it like a big thing. You just have to give a different way for people to get into these animals. And so that's basically how I started. I started doing this probably like 5 years ago. This is a brand called Kiko Comics. And so it's basically my love letter to these animals through art. And then another thing that I also have always liked are superheroes and comic books and things like that. And I think that's a really great avenue for people to get into conservation, especially for the general public, which is the one that I want to reach. And so I always thought, well, what if when I was reading Spider-Man or when I was reading Batman, they each talk about spiders or arachnids or bats in the case of Batman. Maybe they wouldn't be as feared or misunderstood. But they don't do that. So I decided to create it on my own. So this is the cockroach girl. This is a character that is still being workshopped. This is like one of the newest designs. She's called the cockroach girl, but her comics dwell in a lot of different arthropod groups. So she has different villains that she has to fight, and so depending on the villain, she makes a new suit that gives her the power of cockroaches or mantises or dragonflies, things like that. Thus again, in this case, it's more about storytelling and having conservation be guided through this storytelling. This is more about just a story, a superhero story, but there's more stories coming up later on that where I want to actually showcase what it takes to do conservation. And many times, most of the time, it's messy. It's not easy to do, and so also what people, like what we can do to help the species. Yeah. And then another thing that I really like to do is create things with my hands, art. And so I did this piece for the Bohar Museum using specimens from the museum. They were unlabeled, so they weren't used for science, so we used them to make a display. That's another different way to get people just to look at this stuff. Maybe they don't really like bugs, maybe they don't know what this is, but they're just like, oh, this is interesting. That's why I also made the background bugs. So you're like, oh, what's that? Yes. Another thing that I do is make merch. So like in this case, there's stickers. Maybe you saw them when I had my booth up there. People are already buying stickers if they like the design or not. If they like the design, they're going to buy it. But why not add a little bit of education to that part? So did you know that we have bats here in San Diego and that they are pollinators? Or that we have so many types of bees? Like, let's see if I can, there we go. Like the sweat bee, or maybe like this giant carpenter bee. Or did you know that flies are also excellent pollinators? They're actually the second best pollinators. We have chocolate and coffee thanks to them. Yeah, and also wasps. We usually hate wasps because we think they're mean and scary and they sting us. But they look very, very different depending on the wasp that you're looking at. And most of them are pollinators as adults. And so just by adding, for example, the scientific name, or by telling you that these species are here where we live, is a different way to get people's attention. And then the way I really like to work with this is through events like this, like talks, workshops, and hikes throughout San Diego and Baja California. And this is the main project, Bacologist. And so in English, it's called Bacologist, in Spanish, Bichólogo. And so it's called this because not everyone gets a chance to be a biologist. I have heard a lot of people tell me once I'm doing the hikes, like, oh yeah, this is really cool. I always wish I knew this was an option, you know, when I was younger in school. Or I wish I didn't have like money problems and I had to do a different thing to get to where I am today. I wish I could have done this. This looks more fun. And I'm always like, well, how can I make this also more accessible for the general public? It shouldn't be something that is kept behind like a paywall in internet, or it shouldn't be something that you have to travel to a symposium or maybe in school. Science should be accessible for everyone. And I'm from Tijuana. Over there's not much that accessibility to science. You cannot study biology in Tijuana. You have to go more south to Ensenada. And so that's also opening a different niche for people that they are interested. They're just not accessibility for that kind of stuff. And so I decided to create this brand and made it both English and Spanish. So most of my content, the stickers, the comics, everything I try to make it in both Spanish and English, also for that accessibility. Also kind of to make it as kind of like eye-catching as I can, so that people are like, I don't know, I don't like bugs, but that looks kind of interesting. Yeah. And so I started to do different programs to get people involved. I don't do that much work with kids as much anymore. I mostly focus on adults, but this is a program for kids called Buggies for Kitties. And so this was a scout program where we basically go to scout groups and we talk about the bugs with them. This was just the first and only one I've done. Hopefully I get to do more stuff with kids. And that's also like a way to get kids involved in science without having them to sit on a classroom. I remember I didn't really like to sit in a classroom all day, like in a square, and just learning about something that is out there, but I cannot see it. You know, the ecology and the plants and the water cycle, but I'm not really seeing it. In this case, my goal is to bring all of that to them or to take them out to nature. Another thing that I really like to do is what I call field stations. And so they are outreach booths, like the booth that I had up here, and where I bring my collection of specimens. They're all kind of banged up because I have to travel with them. And then, yeah, I sometimes dress up as a spider, or like I do different events depending on the festival or the outreach opportunity. And it's also a different way to get the general public. And this is where you get mostly just general public, people who are not truly looking for this, but maybe a giant spider catches their eye. Or sometimes I dress up as a bat. So it's like, oh, what's this guy going on about? Or many times they're just like, oh, what are these spiders? Why do he have so many? What is this monarch? This is pretty. So again, it's just using different way to get people to care about these animals, because once they're out there and they start to ask questions about the specimens, I can tell them a little bit of a story, like, oh, I got this one, this Jersey cricket, because it was a pet and sadly passed away, and they don't bite, they don't do anything. But that's another way to get people. The lab, these are workshops and talks. This is a lab where I do like a different kind of events, talking about, for example, in this case, bats. And then it precedes another event like a bat hike, or maybe they're origami events where I teach people about an animal and then someone else teaches them about to make the same animal in origami. So it's also like different things that they can take with them. Field sketching, that's something that I really like. And so that is another stuff that I do. But my favorite thing to do is to go out in nature. I love the field. If I could do one thing for the rest of my life, would be field work. And so what I love to do is expeditions. So the guided hikes. So in these guided hikes, what I try to do is to bring people out to nature, usually not too far away from where they live. Usually it's urban parks, both here in Tijuana, both here in San Diego and Tijuana, so that they can know that these animals live here. The cool stuff lives here. So I bring my net, we go catch bugs. This was a bat hike. A lot of people like bats if it's in October. And so it's another way to get people out, to also get them to exercise. And depending on the hike, you get different kinds of people who might be interested in one thing or another. This one was a bug hike. It was actually a Lepidoptera ID course where we tried to get as many butterflies and try to identify them. This was the bat hike where we bring our bat detectors and we look for the echolocation sounds for them. And we are like, oh yeah, there's actually 5 species of bats around here in our neighborhood, here in San Diego. In San Diego, we think there's about 13, more or less. And so that's a different way to get out in nature. And that's something that I really like. If I could do this forever, I would. And then you also get to connect with these animals because you see someone else, you see another human, an adult, grabbing these animals in a safe way. Sometimes you can also handle them, and you're making that connection. You're simply seeing another human doing it, and you're like more prone to doing it too. And all of these are found here in San Diego. Like all of these species are native. Actually, all of these are native. You can see here we have an osmia. This is a type of bee that is blue. This is a green bee. They're really pretty. Yeah, these are the moths that are flying everywhere right now. The hummingbird-shaped moths. And they want you to think it's a hummingbird so that another bird doesn't eat it. And so this is basically what I try to to convey to people that these animals are really cool. They're here. They're very diverse, and we should protect them because also right now we're seeing a lot of decrease in the population of these animals. In the case of bugs, mostly due to pesticide use, but there's also very little room for them to escape to because we have fragmented their habitat. And so that's something that we want to prevent as conservationists. More and more we're seeing people try to preserve bugs, and this is just like my little grain of sand to try to get people involved. So it's kind of like the opening thing for them to get people involved in the actual conservation. And also, I just want to let you know, I was doing the maths a little bit ago. So far, it's 77 events like compiled through the whole year since last April to right now. And so hopefully we do more. Yeah. And then for the future, these are a few things that are coming up really soon. I'm going to do a bilingual podcast called Habitat Fragmented. Also, I want to do some actual conservation and do restoration. So Tijuana Nativa will be a program where we go clean up places in Tijuana and we'll go replant native plants. We also see in INAT what changes in the diversity. Also, the pseudoscorpion corner is going to be a library service. I have a lot of books that I don't read that maybe some of you could use. And so that's going to be something that I'm going to do. And also from mites to whales will be short video format content where I go out to nature and I bring you a specimen from mites to whales. And I tell you how you can find them, what are they important, and most importantly, what you can do to help these species. Excellent. Muchas gracias.
Well, thank you so much, Francisco. I am going to invite all the speakers up to the stage now. We have a panel discussion that's moderated, as well as Q&A session. And I'd also like to introduce our panel moderator, Natalia Rodriguez Ravello. She is a professor at UABC and also academic director of Siempre Viva San Quintin Field Station. She has extensive experience in the Baja California Peninsula, and is also an expert entomologist. And on a personal note, Natalia was actually one of the first people to introduce me to expeditions in Baja California and Baja California Sur. It was like my first week and maybe like my third day or something. I flew down there on an expedition and Natalia took me out the first day and she was setting up traps all over the place and telling me everything. And it was just left a huge impression on me. And I was like, I have to work with this woman. She's amazing. So everyone, welcome Natalia.
Good evening, everyone. Oh my goodness, you blush my hair, my cheeks, Michelle. No, thank you everyone for being this night with everybody and for amazing speakers that we have this night. And yeah, the first time that I met Michelle, it was in October 2020, right? 20 or something like that. And yeah, Michelle running with me with all these trails in La Paz set up a lot of the traps for insects. But yeah, all the amazing speakers for this night, they given to us the perspective, no, for the evolution, for many ideas, and for the new visions for the new generation that we have here. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. And of course, with Sula, it's one of my best friends since 14 years ago, and it was the person that involved me to the expedition in 2014. So right now we have 12 years working together. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here with you on this stage. So for don't be a little more emotional and don't have a tears because I don't bring my tissues. So I will be starting jumping with the first question for all these panelists. So for everybody here with me in the stage, what makes the California region, land or marine, uniquely important for your specialty? So, who is jumping?
I don't know how to answer this question other than this is the place that I fell in love with, and so it's incredibly important to me. But it's also part of one of the world's global biodiversity hotspots, and personally I'm fascinated by deserts because so much of that biodiversity is hidden, you know, and you don't see it for so much of the year, and then there's that rain pulse and suddenly everything's full of life and you realize that you live somewhere that's so rich and so special, and then it kind of goes away again. And so I think having the chance to uncover a lot of the unseen biodiversity is really special. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Thank you, Sula. What about you, Adrian?
For me, I think there's two things. The first one is the binational aspect of this region. I think is very unique because the ocean obviously is connected, and we have two different cultures on each side of the border, but the ecosystem is the same. And you see it underwater, it functions as a unit. And that dualism of one shared ecosystem and so many differences in so many different aspects is very interesting and very challenging. And the other thing I think is, this region is at the edge of the distribution of many tropical species. Like I was describing in the middle of the peninsula, that's the northernmost distribution of many tropical species, and the southernmost distribution of temperate species like the kelp forest. And in the world, this is one of the regions like are considered like hotspots for climate change, where this boundary is being shifted over the last few years. Like we have seen the kelp forests retreating to the north about 100 kilometers in the last 10 years. And that's what the textbook says, and we are seeing it underwater live here. So this is a very unique place because of the magnitude of the changes that we are observing based on the position of the planet.
Yeah, that's completely true, no? The tropicalization about the distribution and all the warming in the water that changed everything. So what about for you, Francisco?
Well, there's a lot of diversity in bugs here in California and in Baja California. We, right here in Baja California and throughout California, are very similar to each other compared to the rest of Mexico to Baja California. I think we are kind of like a little bit separate, and so that brings a lot of endemism, meaning that you only get that species here, and that's very true for bugs. And so I really like that aspect, that there's a lot of bugs unique to the region, and there's also a lot of species that we're still discovering and that we don't know about yet. And so just talking about native bees, it is estimated there's probably more than 800 types of bees in the Baja California Peninsula. And that's just because we like bees and because they're pollinators and because we like to study them and we put a lot of funds towards them. But what about everything else? Can you imagine if we put the same amount of money for spiders or scorpions or things like that, or flies? And I think I like that there's a lot of potential to learn about the region. And that's also why I chose the project to be bugs, because there's still a lot of them.
Yeah, that is amazing. Be a person that study biology, it's impressive, no? It's amazing the work that we have, and we know just like a minimal. Talking about for insects, not for other things, not for plants, but yeah, only for insects. So I will be jumping with each one for a straight question. And I want to start with you, Adrian, because I heard that you was been in almost 30 expeditions around for all your career. So in that perspective, what does it mean for you be involved in a lot of the expeditions?
Well, I was a PhD student at the University of Arizona when I participated in my first marine expedition. And that changed my life because I discovered, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So we were in a boat with a very diverse group of people. So I was a student, and we were in the Northern Gulf of California. And in the boat, there was a mix of people that I haven't seen before in that setting. So it was some academic students and some professors from the universities, Mexico and the US. There were some NGOs, staff that work with the fishing communities in Mexico, the Northern Gulf of California, from Cedo, from Kobe. And there were many fishers, like actual fishers that were trained by some of these organizations in scuba diving and monitoring. And just the diversity of perspectives in that place, and it was amazing. And I realized at that moment that it was a very a level of intensity in terms of how much you can learn and how much you are literally submerged and surrounded by nature. That is, it was addictive. So I had to continue doing it and find excuses to continue doing it. And just realizing that every time you go in an expedition, you find something different. And I think that part tells us about how little we know about places that are very close to us, are very familiar, but at the same time, they have so many different secrets to uncover yet. So.
Yeah, I understand very well because, yeah, it could be an addiction. And that it was the next person that I will be jumping in the question because that person, they bring to me that addiction for expedition, and that it was Sula. So, yeah, it was in 2014, first expedition going to the Valle Tranquilo for Terra Peninsular, so rusty place, so complicated land. So, Sula, what other ways can expedition to use to promote learning and education?
Okay, I like this question. So it's really, really hard to talk about expeditions for less than 20 minutes. And there's so many other amazing expeditions we could talk about, but I'd like to give one example actually from an expedition that Adrienne and I did together a couple of years ago now, where we took the scientific goals almost completely out of the equation and we did an education expedition. And the whole goal of the expedition was to teach people about expeditions and doing research and going into the field. And to do this, we did a tiered learning system where we brought our graduate students, and we also brought some high school students, and then we brought some middle school students, and so on and so on. And so our PhD students trained our master students, and the master students trained the undergrads, and the undergrads taught things to the high school students, and everybody was teaching and learning in that same environment. And so I think there's lots of potential for these new models for kind of educational expeditions. And the other thing that I forgot to mention in my talk that I would love to add is that when we bring together the natural sciences and the social sciences, we get so much more out of this. And I think traditionally, when we've gone to the field and when we've talked about being multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary, it's often just been, you know, the bug guys, the plant guys, the mammal guys, and girls. But we haven't thought about what about the social scientists, what about the linguists, what about the artists, what about, you know, all the other researchers in our community. And so I think those make for the most valuable expeditions now, when we could all come together and bridge social and natural sciences.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. No, each expedition is just like a learning, no, for everyone, no, professional, the capacities, and I guess for Sula and Adrian, they happen the same with the student, no, the new generation, no, that will be back with us and trying to make learning and much better, no. So thinking about for the community, and because we know that you, Francisco, work a lot of stretch with them, what do you think the value is to involving the community in the exploration of nature?
Yes. So in the presentation that I had, I talked about how I want to make science more accessible for people by doing the hikes and the art and the events. But that's also because we need them. We need people. We as conservationists, we need you to preserve the species because you are the ones who are interacting with the species in their natural ecosystem. So like when you go to these places, like the expeditions, and you see the people who when you leave, they're the ones who are going to keep being there, taking care of the land, and who also depend on this conservation project. That's kind of like my way of doing it, more in an urbanized setting. But I think it's very important for us as conservationists to get the public involved. And when there's a lot of need for it right here in San Diego and Tijuana, I think that makes it really important to get people just to care about the species so that they can get into the conservation projects. And also by taking them into these expeditions, even though like I'm not going out to like the mountains and stuff, I basically taking them to a mini expedition in the guided hikes, and every time I find something that I hadn't seen before. Like literally every time I see a bat or frog, or mostly bugs, that I didn't know that they existed here. And for the most part, that is true also for the people who are coming here to the events. And so that makes it really cool experience for them. And then they're like, oh, I made a connection with this animal. They're cool. They live here in my backyard. They did something funny. Maybe they flew and they fell or something. And so next time that person, that mom, that dad, or the kid sees that bug in their house, they're gonna be like, hey, don't kill it. Why? Well, because they don't do anything, or just I think they're cool or something. And so I think that's, for me, that's why it's very important to get them involved and to get the community involved in conservation.
Yeah, that is completely true because, yeah, I think that if we don't have the chance of the better willing to try to be working with the community, I think that all the expedition and the projects, that could be working. And that is the way that jumping, maybe not too nicely question for all the panel, but we are living, and of course, with the political things, and that makes sense. What opportunities and challenges are currently facing border research? Because right now we hear a lot of the amazing expeditions and the beauty for everything, but we are facing a challenge in the next future or right now?
Yes, we're facing a challenge. But I want to talk about the opportunities. I think we're in a time of enormous opportunity to come together, to work in every way that we can to make those borders not exist by showing that our community is strong and that we are together and that we work together and that we, are going to rise above the challenges of our time. I think there's a lot of opportunities as technology advances. There's more and more opportunities to do things virtually and to do things where we can collaborate in new ways and through new platforms and engage in new ways and find each other and come together in new ways and share in new ways. And I think we have to stay positive. We can do this.
Thank you, Sula.
Yeah, I think I agree that we need to focus on the positive aspects, and I always find communities like this. This is a good example of people that really care about what's happening across the border, and there is a community of scientists and educators and just regular people that are really interested in understanding or the shared challenges across the border. And you can build a community with them, and that's what we have tried to do from the academic part, and Sula and many people here are doing the same. And I think we need to continue with these communities and to strengthen them and to find more opportunities to continue doing things like this. because the challenges are there and are going to be there and are just increasing. So we need to continue to get stronger together.
Francisco?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we have documented there's a lot of species that have lost their historic range because of the fragmentation of the habitat by many reasons, but mainly the border. And so I live really close to the border, and I just crossed it. And so for me, it's already like, why do I have to do this every day? Now imagine for animals that really don't fit through the bars of the wall, or like animals where their historic range was to migrate through. And so I think with this project, what I'm trying to do is to get people involved on both sides and to get people enthusiastic about preservation of our native region, so much that they can kind of see that it's the same region. We sometimes forget, I forget, that it's so different when you cross the border. For either side, it's kind of like entering a different world. But it's the same thing. It's the same habitat, it's the same ecosystem. And so I think just by having more connectivity, between us, we can have more connectivity in the conservation of the region. And I think something really cool is like this panel. It's like all of us, we do our work over there in Baja California. And many of us live down there. And so just getting different points of reference for what we need to do is like, well, I see in Tijuana there's the sewer crisis and there's a lot of pesticide use in areas where people live, and different things that maybe through a different lens, like scientists from the US, we might have some answers, and the opposite too. There's a lot of views that we have in Mexico that could be used over here. So it's like, yeah, I think what gives me hope in the face of this that is happening, the fragmentation of our habitat, what gives me hope is that we are seeing a lot of people come together, and we're seeing also a lot of indigenous perspectives coming into play. I think I never was in contact with the indigenous communities until I became educator, and so I think that makes right now the future more hopeful. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah, that's completely true. No, we have a lot of challenge, but the opportunities are more. And the things is that working together and binational projects, just like we are running, it's the opportunity, no, for making challenge. So this is the timing for open this question for the public. So who wants ask the first one? Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Joan. I'm a student at City College. I'm about to transfer hopefully to SDSU. Just got accepted, all the universities. San Diego Bird Alliance, go San Diego Bird Alliance. San Diego Bird Alliance. I wanted to ask Zula, because I'm also the president of my club for the Bird Alliance City College. I wanted to ask, if I have to define to them the difference between, say, multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary, I think it's a semantic thing, but how would you define those two things? And then second to that, how do I go on an expedition? Like as an undergrad, I want to go on an expedition. So for the whole panel,
Thank you. I will just repeat the question quickly because not everybody can hear. So the first question was if I could define the difference between multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary. And the second question was, how can I go on an expedition? So multidisciplinary, I think, encompasses any time that you go in the field with another discipline, right? So more than one discipline, so not just the botany team, we're multidisciplinary. When we talk about trying to be transdisciplinary, to my mind, what we're trying to achieve, and I think it's actually really hard for what it's worth. I think it's proving to be a hard thing to do with few examples of it being done well. But when we talk about being transdisciplinary, what we're trying to achieve is a very synthetic and integrated experience. So we don't all go to a place and then go in different directions, and the entomologists to the left and the botanists to the right and the birders up the hill, that we come together and maybe we pick a research subject that happens to be this tree and how it's a home to these insects and a resource for these birds, and that we try to put together a synthetic and integrated view and study and move in that way. I hope I'm answering your question, but the whole being more than the sum of its parts, right? It's like water. And your other question, okay, so how can you take part in expeditions? Are you referring specifically to Baja California? Great. Well, and I will also say you can start with the Border BioBlitz, which is running all of this month and next. There are several organized nodes all through the border region, both sides of the border, and they're open to the public. You can start your own node. You can organize your own expedition. And if you want to come on some of these bigger ones, I would say you can volunteer at the NAT. You can get in touch with any of us and express your interest. There's always volunteer opportunities, I think, with a lot of us. And I would also say, don't be afraid to start your own expedition. I mean, you can do it.
Okay, here, Tom.
I have a technical question for Adrian. On your map of biodiversity, the area around Cedros Island was lower than the area north of it. And I'm curious why that would be, because it's a pretty diverse area otherwise.
Oh, thank you. So the question is why the area around Cedros Islands, which is an island in the middle of the peninsula, why it show like lower diversity? So that's a good question. I'm wondering the same. Because when that's an area that has one of the most resilient kelp forests, even when the kelp forest disappears. Cedros Island, Natividad Island, and Punta Eugenia across, they have very close upwelling, and they have very cold waters that we believe buffer them. And I think it is related to the fact of when we sampled. Because depending on, we're trying still to understand this, but depending on when you sample in the heat wave, you might have very low levels of diversity after, for instance, the heat wave itself, before the community bounces back. So that's my guess. So we have some other years that we haven't analyzed yet the samples. So we're trying to develop a time series to try to answer those questions, to see if those patterns are persistent over multiple years, or is just the change that we are observing based on the phase of the heat wave where we are. So we need to do it over multiple years to understand better.
Just to follow up, they're talking about a heavy El Nino next year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be another kelp forest killer?
It could be, yeah.
It could also bring rain to Southern California, which in the Southwest is really needed.
Yeah, the El Nino and the heat waves are directly correlated, and when that happens, yes, most of the kelp forests disappear, and we see changes in the fisheries and the species moving. What we are seeing, these events are becoming more intense and more frequent every time. So yeah, we are going to have them in the future for sure.
I'm going to try and repeat your question, so just help me make sure I got all of that. But as people that have the privilege of organizing expeditions, we're often able to mobilize a lot of resources. How do we decide who gets to go? How do we decide where we go? And how do we make sure that our decisions aren't influenced by our own like egos and career needs. Is that an accurate representation of your? So I kind of mentioned this, but one of the things that we've been doing and that I feel is our best way we've found so far at trying to open this up is that we offer spaces for where people can apply to come. And those spaces are normally specifically designated either for people from the social sciences or different disciplines, or students, or people that wouldn't otherwise have those opportunities, or, and so I think that's one way that we're trying very hard to include more young people, more students, a greater variety of perspectives, and a greater diversity of worldviews in those expeditions. In terms of the places, at this point, I'm very focused on trying to figure out where conservation need is, but I think we've got to be very honest too. The areas of the most need are not always the areas funded. And often there's funding for things that you might not consider the highest need. And so I think we just have to be really honest that in the real world, economics drive a lot of that, and that's out of our control. And in terms of how you avoid that being more for your own benefit, that's a really hard question. I mean, you like to think that you're you're putting the world first and everybody else first, but of course you have your own needs, and your own and if you're not able to rise up in your positions too, you're not able to keep offering those opportunities to others. And so I do think that's a fine balance and a good thing for you to ask. And I'm going to hand over to Adrian and see what he wants to add.
Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent question. What I try to do is take as many opportunities as I can, if the conditions are there, and try to build these sets of spatial or temporal sets that can add value, like I just showed. That each collection, even if it is the same site but on a different time, adds context to the previous samples or to the sample next to that. So I'm trying to add value to all the work that I'm doing, and I try to share that. And one thing that we have found very useful when we don't have a lot of resources, because sometimes this could be seen as very exclusive, right? Like how much money you need to rent a boat and go to this place, right? So we partner with the people that live near these places. So we are giving eDNA kits, for instance, and Niskin bottles to fishers in different parts of the Baja California Peninsula, so they can help us to collect the data when we go in expeditions. So if we cannot go and these people live there, they can go in the panga because their family goes fishing every week, and they can collect samples, and they preserve the samples, and they send the samples to us. And this is how we are getting some of the time series that are very useful and are very difficult to collect, because you cannot organize an expedition every year to a certain place. But if you give kits to these communities and they start collecting data, then suddenly after 2 years you have a beautiful every month sampling of this area around Cedros Island, for instance, and we can start answering some other questions. So I think you need to partner with the people that live there, train them, and engage with them in collecting data and understanding why it's important to take the data.
Okay, the lady to the blue one, in the back.
Hi, my question is directed towards Adrian and his work. So I recently did some analysis on restored kelp forests in Orange County, and they actually replanted a particular species that was prolific in the Baja region. And I'm just really curious to know what the current restoration efforts are for the kelp forest there. Like, are there efforts in urchin bear
In Mexico, you mean?
Yeah, in Mexico.
Okay, I think everybody heard the question, right? Yeah, okay. So, so what are we doing in Mexico to, in terms of the restoration of kelp forest or trying to buffer some of the effects of climate change? So there is a lot, recently there is a lot of interest about restoration, and there is a national program of restoration being pushed by the ecology secretary at the national level, which is really interesting because I think we are seeing a shift towards active activities, like active interventions in nature, has a way to change some of the trajectories that we are seeing in the ocean and in the land too. And I think that's a little scary. It could be scary because that assumes that we can replicate what nature is doing and at the scale that nature does it. And that's a very big assumption that I don't think we can meet in every time or everywhere, especially in terms of introducing kelp varieties or any particular genotype of kelp or mangrove or coral or whatever you are restoring, and the effects that that's going to have into the future. And I think we need a lot of research while we are doing that, because there can be some very unintended consequences of good actions, with very good intentions, but at the end, if you are wiping out the natural diversity of these places, these restored kelps might not behave like the natural kelps. So there is a lot of interest in that, and I think we are going to see a lot of restoration efforts in the future, but that comes with a lot of new questions about how we can try to replicate what nature does. And the answer is that it's not very easy. So the other side of that question is, okay, we can try to replicate what nature does, but we can also protect what nature continues to do, right? And we should also keep doing that, because it's very difficult to try to do what nature does.
Okay, let me go with the lady in the top to my right.
Cool. This is a technical question. I love it. So the question is, like if you go to the deep sea and you sequence these molecules, how do you annotate them? How do you know which species it is? And the answer is we don't know. So I didn't mention it, but the deeper that you go, the percentage of things that you cannot assign at lower taxonomic levels increases a lot. And for the deep sea, being below 200 meters, that's over half of the samples. You cannot annotate them, sometimes even to the phylum level. That means that there is no similar sequences in the databases anywhere in the world to what you are getting. And that's the reality of the deep sea research. So we don't know. If you go just right here and sequence something below 200 meters, half of those sequences, they are not going to have any match, because nobody has sequenced them before, and you don't know. So that's the reality, but that can change in the future, because even when you don't know exactly which species it is, you register the actual sequence. And maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, somebody is going to have a specimen and identify that and put a name. So even when you don't have all the taxonomy, that information is very useful, because you are creating this baseline of things that you might get all the taxonomy details later, but you know where they are right now. So, but that tells you something about how little we know about the biodiversity in these ecosystems, even when they are very close to us, but they are inaccessible in many ways.
Okay, yeah, the friend from here.
My question is mostly Francisco, but Sula also mentioned the arts in her talk, but Francisco mentioned a lot of ways that drawing and art can be used in the communication part. But what do you see, and Sula as well, what do you see as the role of drawing or art in the actual expedition part?
Okay. So, yes. So the question is, what is the role of like drawing and art and science and expeditions? And so I really like art just in general because it gives me a different perspective of what I'm looking at. But also I learn a lot about the specimen or the animal, the plant, when I'm drawing it because you're looking at the details, you're looking at things that you might have not noticed before, but you know that there's specific things, for example, in a bug, there's specific parts of their body that are key to identifying them. And so, for example, if you try to do field sketching for actually identifying the species later, it's really helpful that you focus on different parts like the veins of the wings, depending on the species, and also the segments of the legs, things like that. And that also gives you a different perspective of the animal that you might have not noticed before. Maybe you're like, oh yeah, that's just an ant or a beetle. But maybe you look at it closer and you see that it has all of these striations around the body, or the antennas are missing some segments that in other species they have. And so I think it's really useful just for us to know more as people who want to get into science and art. And I also think it's really useful when you're trying to preserve species that might not look the same way after they have been preserved. So like, for example, some plants, kelp, things that might need to be dried off for you to preserve them. Maybe doing a drawing about how the light reflects on them, or how you would find them actually in the field is not the same as how you find them in a collection. And so I think that also could be a good thing for why like sketching or doing art out in the field is helpful.
Sula.
Thank you, and I love this question. I think in part art is a gateway drug for science. You know, and for conservation, for the natural world, and for getting people interested, and being able to show people artistic rendering is a really great way to bring people in. But you asked specifically about art and expeditions, and I am reminded of a beautiful painting from the Jesuit Father Ignacio Tush. I think it's from 16 something. I can't remember the exact year, but the 1600s. And he had painted a beautiful picture in Cabo Polmo that was called My House on the Shore of the Sea, with some utensils nearby. And then you can see there's sort of a canoe and this beautiful intact landscape in the background, and the sun is shining and the ocean is blue. And you're suddenly transported in time, and you realize that for hundreds and hundreds of years, people have been living in this place, and it's been beautiful and well conserved. And there's a messaging within that art that captures things that we just can't capture in pictures. And I think that being able to include those moments in time and being able to give that sense of place through art is really, really valuable.
We have one more question in the back. Yeah.
My question is for Francisco, and I guess the audience could just look at book. Have you seen a shift in people's perspective of pins and a few years from now, positive? You've been working a lot on teaching people, so maybe that's work a little bit.
Yes. So the question is, how do you see people's perspective on bugs shift throughout the years? Is that the question? Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, I've seen that people are more prone to liking bugs right now. Definitely, I remember when just a few years ago when I started to work with bugs a lot, not many people liked them, or some people were afraid, or just didn't know how to approach them. But more and more we're seeing, with the help of, for example, media, movies, television, comic books, that are anime, that are approaching arthropods in a different way, in a more, you could say, not a realistic way, just a more appealing way. That's what I'm trying to do with some of the arts. And so I have seen also make its way to fashion. I didn't talk about that. I really like fashion, love designing, and so I see it a lot with, for example, people making jewelry or making shirts, making different apparel that has insects, and because they are so diverse, both in their color and their shape, they're a very good example to use as shirts or like different cardigans, things that you can make. So I have also seen a lot of people take that as a kind of like a win for bugs. It's like, oh yeah, bugs aren't something far away in a corner hidden. They're something that you can wear and that you can actually show that is pretty. And so I have seen a good shift in that. I like that less and less I'm getting looks of like ooh, or what's that when I'm showing them a bug, and more of like maybe I don't like it, but I want to know what you say. Maybe it's not as commonplace anymore to hate on bugs. Maybe, yeah. I hope that it continues to be like that, because we do need more people to care about these animals, bugs, bats, sharks, all of these animals that usually are deemed as sometimes aggressive or dangerous towards us, but are just another creature. And so I think more and more we're realizing that, the more effective science communication connects us with these creatures. Yeah.
Yeah, for making my brief participation in this question, it's complicated. And we want to be just like at the Fisher Price, one step to the time, because yeah, that's true. Because sometimes you can try to show the beauty, no? Because most of the people are afraid of things that they don't know, no? And us that my team, my friends that the entomology crew here from the net, all the time when we try to make the outreach with the people, most of the time, just like the Francisco say, they scare because they don't know, or they say, oh my God, that moth, it's venom. Because my grandma told me that if I touch, they could be a poison me and then go to the, so our job is try to broke that kind of the myths, so subtle but gentle, to try to go in and change a little bit the perspective. No, maybe you cannot change everything in once that you want to have the chance to talk with the people, but that is a part of our job, no? Trying to make once at a time and try to spread all the knowledge and the different ways and the different perspective that we can do for the time. So we are almost running in the last time from here. So, Michelle.
I lost my microphone. Let's have a round of applause for Natalia and all the speakers. It was such a wonderful symposium. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the audience for participating and asking wonderful, wonderful questions. That always makes it more fun. And with that, I'll bid you all a good night. Please come next year to State of Biodiversity. It was so fun to see you all. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.